Hello and welcome to episode 36 of Generations Apart. I'm Robbie.
And I'm Jay.
And on today's episode, we're talking about the latest Xbox hardware leaks and taking a look at one of the hottest games out at the moment, Starfield. We'll chat through some of the bizarre news stories around this game and our initial thoughts and its general reception. Before we get into that, though, Jay, what's new with you this week?
So this week, I wanted to talk very quickly about something that caught my eye in the press. It was a release from Amazon, and they are talking about bringing generative AI to all of our favourites' Home Assistant. Alexa. Try not to say it out loud so as not to trigger mine. But your Echo device will soon be powered by generative AI, allowing it basically to converse with you in a more intelligent way. They said in the release that apparently the LLM has been specifically focused or trained to deal well with voice interactions. So that's kind of the focus of the training of the particular large language model.
Yeah.
And they're talking about the idea, I think, of just making your Home Assistant more intelligent, basically. So being able to say things to it like, I'm cold, and then the device can then just turn up your heating. It just knows how to make that link between what you said you are or your particular position and what it can do for you. So I thought it was quite interesting. I think people are already a little bit concerned about how they are monitored by their Home Assistants. I know a lot of people over the years have got a little twitchy about what isn't being recorded, what isn't being used. I've got to be honest, I know that they tell us that none of this stuff is used and nothing's recorded, and is sent back to base, so to speak. But I have had some very curious situations in the past where I've talked about something and then something similar has turned up in one of my shopping feed recommendations or my Instagram or something like that. And I think, how did that get there? I haven't Googled that. I haven't searched for that. I haven't messaged anyone that. So I don't know. Anyway, whether that's true or not, I'm not sure. But apparently, Alexa's going to be getting some GenAI capabilities, and I thought that was interesting.
That is pretty cool. I'm still, in my mind, I can't really think of that many use cases. It's cool, the idea of telling them how you're feeling, and then it can infer some actions from it. But I don't know. I'm struggling to think about how you would use it.
I guess think about how we might already use a large language model. It's the creativity, isn't it? Or the summarization. So I guess being able to have the kind of summaries that are read back to you when you ask a question be slightly more intelligent than Wikipedia says, or I found a website that says, and then it just reads it back to you.
Yeah.
The response could be more tailored. It could sound more specific and more focused. There's some quite creative stuff that you can do for kids with your Alexa devices, and I wonder if that might get an uplift as part of this. So, being able to ask it to create stories, things like that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just think it was obvious, wasn't it? I guess eventually we were going to see these assistants receive this kind of power up, if you can call it that.
True.
I mean, they're already pretty capable. I'm always surprised by what my kids are able to get Alexa to do when they'll ask it a question, and I'll think, there's no way it's going to answer that.
Yeah.
But I'm constrained in my mind because I think it's outside the realms of technical capability, or I'm trying to apply too much logic to it, and they'll ask a question and it'll do it. And I'll be like, I'd just be very surprised by some of the stuff that it can do. And of course, their innocent minds don't realise or think about the limitations. They just ask it everything because they assume it knows everything. And soon it may well do.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, it's funny that, especially when you compare it with something like Siri, where it seems very limited in comparison to Alexa.
I tried my my HomePod Mini against my Alexa the other day, actually. I can't remember what I was asking it. It was a very simple question. I was asking it for some sort of definition for a technical term I'd come across on some e-learning I was doing. And Alexa handled it very well, gave me a competent answer, and I've triggered it now. But
you can hear the compliments.
But the HomePod just couldn't do it. Just completely didn't have a clue what I was asking. So Siri needs to. Siri
it puts you off using other AI assistants, doesn't it? So I mean, in my mind, I'm the same. I'm constrained by what I think Siri can do when I ask any AI assistant. So yeah, interesting.
What about you? What's new for you?
Well, I was on Instagram the other day, and I got loads of Amazon ads on Instagram, and I saw this one thing and I had to tell you about it because I remember in one of our earlier episodes where we were talking about older generations of consoles, and you remember we were talking about the original Xbox and the Juggernaut controller. Do you remember we had that conversation?
The
Duke, sorry. Juggernaut. I've even got it up here, and I've just anyway. The Duke, yeah. So
I do remember.
It was for those who are not watching on YouTube. I brought it up on screen, but in that episode, we were chatting about how I think it was the first controller that came with the original Xbox, and then they pivoted the form factor because it was such a huge controller in the hand. And rightly so, because it must have been quite uncomfortable to hold. But clearly, it's some kind of cult classic because there's an Amazon listing here for the Duke, but as a modern controller using, I think, Type C or Type A even. You can plug it into your Xbox or your Windows PC and use the Duke with your PC. And it's even got this old retro kind of partially see-through green look to the controller as well. Or you can have it in, I think, the original black if you like. I think
they did release it. Yeah, so I do know about this. I have seen it before. I think I can't remember what the guy's name is now, which is really bad because he's famous. But the guy who originally designed the first Xbox was involved in bringing it back.
Really?
So yeah, I remember when it was announced. I almost bought one, but I honestly had no attachment to the original console, having not owned it in my youth. I do own one now, but I've never really sat and played with the Duke, and it is unwieldy. It is too much. So other than for the novelty value of hanging it on a wall, which I just didn't think
getting into your
really,
controller collections now, though.
I didn't think it really made sense, so I decided not to do it. What's weird about those controllers, and you can see it on screen there, for those watching along on YouTube, the face buttons, you'll notice above what we've gotten used to now, the traditional A, B, X, Y, there's also a white and black button. Can you see those?
Yep.
So those were instead of the additional shoulder button. So the original controllers didn't have all the different shoulder triggers that one's got.
Yeah.
It had on the shoulders, and that was it. Those face buttons were almost like your R2, your L2. It's interesting that they've kept those buttons, but also added 2 appropriate shoulder buttons. So I assume there must be some replication.
Have they done the shoulder buttons as well?
Yeah, you can see it on the back, on one of the pictures further down. There's a grip, a top button, and a slightly lower down.
Oh wow! So extra buttons.
Those lower ones wouldn't have been on the original. For those not watching, this model's got typical shoulder buttons right at the top of the controller, but then also 2 triggers almost halfway down on the stalks that you grip.
And they're so far apart. Can you imagine playing with those? That would be painful.
They are mad, aren't they? So yeah, I think anyone choosing to play with that is probably doing so because of the nostalgia and nothing else.
I quite like as well that there's a big Xbox logo in the middle, but that's actually an animated screen.
Which was definitely not on the Duke.
No, it wasn't.
I believe it's customizable, isn't it, as well? I don't know.
I haven't seen much on here about it being customizable, but certainly animated with the Xbox logo.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell how old the listing is because it specifies Windows 10 as its compatible PC operating system. So I think it is a few years old now at this point.
And it's micro USB and not Type C as well.
Yeah, I think it was pre-Series X and S. I think it was back in the Xbox One days.
Yeah,
this was made. But yeah, it's great. It looks really good. I'd love to get one. I always hoped I'd see one in a bargain bin and pick it up for 20 quid.
Yeah.
They're still holding their price. I haven't.
Yeah, $74.94 as well for that. So that's not a cheap controller either.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. You can get a decent brand new Xbox One controller for that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so before we get into Starfield, and I know you've got lots of kind of points to talk through, kind of out of left field last week when we were planning our episodes, there was another leak of documents as part of the Xbox or Microsoft and FTC legal case, which is now I think drawing to a close. I don't know if you also saw on that subject that the UK had approved the purchase now.
Oh, I didn't
based on some changes. So the purchase has been approved by the UK, which was one of the stumbling blocks. It's just the FTC to go now, and I think the appeal is due to be dealt with very soon, and they're rapidly running out of time. So I think that deal will be done very soon. They seem quite confident now, I think, Microsoft. But unfortunately, and it's come from their side, apparently, Microsoft or their lawyers have leaked a bunch of documents as part of this that was purely accidental. And I think what's happened is documents were attached to genuine documents that were meant to be part of the case and uploaded in error. and those documents contain loads of internal secrets and information about their roadmap.
Yep.
It's a real shame because Microsoft just can't get a break at the moment. It's
not very lucky of them, is it?
They have had a bad summer, and then they had a good showcase. Then they had the legal stuff. Then they had Starfield, and that's gone generally well. But we'll talk about that. And then this, so it's a bit of a bummer, especially if you're an Xbox fan. But there is some interesting stuff in it. I'm not going to get into all of it because we haven't got time. There's an episode's worth of stuff that came out around games and Bethesda games that were due to be released or that were in development. Apparently, there's an Oblivion remaster, which has never been announced and stuff like that. But what I wanted to have a look at, and if you just bring the link up from Engadget, which is the source that we've chosen, we'll share the link. There's a couple of things that are interesting. So there were a couple of console revisions that were in this, or at least suggested. Now, there's no guarantees these are ever going to be released. These could be internal mock-ups for purposes of presentation. There could be 4 or 5 different iterations of this since we've seen it. But we'll discuss it as if it is real. So the first one is Codename Brooklyn, which is an Xbox Series X refresh. And for those watching along, we'll be showing the sort of mock-up. But it effectively looks like a cylindrical version of the Xbox Series X that we know now, so a tower. Yeah. Slightly smaller. It's no disk drive, and looks like it's USB-C on the front, which I think is unique to this console. They call it adorably all digital.
I know. I was just read that. That's some hilarious wording for it.
Which is pretty bad. So it's going to be apparently according to the leaks, it's the same price, so $499 as it's stated here, minus a disk drive, but it doubles the storage space. So it's 2 terabyte hard drive. But with the flagship console going diskless and rumours that the PS5 might be releasing a sort of step change or a slim with a modular disk drive, are we seeing the big console giants now finally trying to put disk-based games to bed? But it was quite interesting. There's not a lot else in there to honestly say about it. There's some upgrades to the Wi-Fi chips.
Bluetooth as well?
It's more. I think Bluetooth's always been in there, though, I think.
No, sorry, but it's a new version of Bluetooth, I guess.
Oh, right, yeah, sorry. It's more sustainable, so they're saying it's less power hungry.
Yeah.
And there was also, you should say in these leaks, but it's even less interesting, was a Series S refresh, which did very, very little. So I wanted to call it out. I thought it was interesting, really only because of the fact that if this kind of mid-cycle console revision does come out, it is diskless, which is an interesting push from Xbox.
Yeah.
And it links into something which we won't get into because it's more of a future kind of next-gen console watch kind of conversation, but they also talked about what their next console might look like and the idea that might come in 2028.
2028.
So, yeah, 2028 is the rumored sort of date, which is not a surprise. It's like an 8-year cycle. It's about cycle. Right.
Yeah.
But that would also be an all-digital device. So it's interesting that I think Xbox might finally be pushing in this direction, whether you'll be able to buy kind of an external disk drive or not, or whether they're just trying to push all game developers now to stop making discs, which would be very bad for the likes of Game or the retailers who are already frankly on their knees when it comes to video games, who are rapidly pivoting to selling just toys. I mean, I was in Game the other day and there's just nothing there but toys.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts? I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it. Do you want an all digital Xbox Series X?
I had heard about the leaks, and I hadn't delved too much into it, but I think all digital, to be honest, is probably where they're all going. But I do think it's a shame, mostly for the consumers, because kind of second-hand games, the market will obviously just kind of crumble with the new consoles. And it's a great market for people who want to get into games cheap, like long after they've been launched. And digital, it's kind of new, or I don't know, you might get some keys secondhand or something online, but it's not going to be as cheap as just buying or even borrowing a friend's game or anything like that. For once they complete it, you could just kind of pass it around your mates, like all that stuff. It's just a shame to lose that for the consumers. I think it's yeah.
But we've largely lost that, haven't we? In other forms of multimedia, where you look at kind of ebooks. Although I still think the sort of physical print is doing very well in that space.
Yeah, still winning. Music,
not so much, and I would say entertainment, sort of multimedia. Home cinema, TV box sets. That all of that stuff's dwindling now. And there's so much content out there. A bit like gaming. There is some gaming that fits in this category, but that is only available digitally.
Yeah.
Which, is a bit of a shame. I don't want to see it go that way. I've kind of just gone the other way. At one point, I was all in on all digital, and then I started to spot the concerns around the rip-off nature of PlayStation's digital approach, for example. And also, I've got a very nerdy old retro game collection. It would be nice to continue that. Although I do think, and I must admit, as I am buying games for my collection, I do have to look at them and think, did this game have a sort of significant digital upgrade, that isn't going to be on this disc, that isn't going to be playable in the future? Look at things like, I think, Marvel's Avengers. You kind of own the disc for that, but they're shutting the servers down soon, so that game's going to fundamentally stop working.
Oh, really?
Even with the disc, there's going to be very little you can do with that game.
I suppose
I think that's the main story campaign, if it still works.
That is the other thing, I suppose, actually, is there a expiry date on new games that rely on servers and stuff like that eventually anyway?
Well, that's it. I think there is, so a lot of the stuff I've got in my collection predates any of this stuff.
Yeah.
The online components, with the exception of a few things like Call of Duty and stuff, would have been secondary to the main game. So they're fine.
Yeah.
They live on. I can turn on the Xbox 360. In fact, I was getting back into a bit of Guitar Hero earlier this week, which was a lot of fun. But also, you can turn on any of those games and they work. Whereas I do think there's going to be a situation in the future with these kind of games where you simply won't be able to do that. But it's a real shame because, think about music. You can still release a limited edition record on vinyl and people will buy it. And they can play it on their old record player. You're not going to have that ability in the gaming world to release a limited run physical copy.
Yeah.
Because if the consoles don't support it, PCs now these days don't tend to have CD drives. There's no physical way to play it.
Yeah.
What you'll be able to do is buy things like the Spider-Man 2 upcoming collector's edition, which doesn't come with a physical copy of the game. At £230, doesn't include the game, which is mad to me.
That's
you get
wild.
the digital game, you don't get the physical disc, despite the fact that the physical disc is going to be released. Anyway,
weird.
I know.
That's a side
we're
rant,
going a
I
little
think.
off track. Yeah, side rant. The other thing, though, so if you could just scroll to the second image, was Project Sabile, I'm going to call it, which is a new Xbox controller. In my throat. The world's best, it says. Now, there's more to like here. So just have a little look at some of those key points while I have a sip of water. Anything jump out at you?
Yeah, I did see this in the leaks, the direct-to-cloud connection. I knew that was something that would be piquing your interest on this one. And it's something that Google Stadia did with their controllers as well, right? So you have a device that connects to the cloud for the game, but then you have the controller that connects to the cloud so that there's no latency of you connecting to a device, then send it to the cloud for the game itself.
That's it, and I think that was what struck me with this. There's a couple of things in there, to be fair. It's not just that. So you've got, as you mentioned, direct to cloud. That's fascinating. You've got the mobile app, which allows you to control which devices are paired to your device and the cloud connection.
That's handy.
And any other accessories. So that's quite cool. So having it paired to multiple devices. I like the idea that you could have it paired at home, your home console, and then on the go, take that controller with you and have it paired to the cloud and then potentially stream the game you were playing and carry on from the cloud, the xCloud. So that could be quite cool. They're also bringing in haptic feedback, some additional precision haptic feedback, which I think is new, and presumably in kind of response to PlayStation. They've also got the speakers, therefore, built into the hardware as well, which I think you mentioned before we started recording. An accelerometer, which is basically for your movement-based stuff, isn't it? So the Xbox has never had an accelerometer before. So that's
now
new to this
similar
hardware.
to what the kind of PS4 controller introduced, right? So you had the haptics.
It's what's in your Switch as well. Your Switch has got an accelerometer.
Yeah.
Don't really know why you need that for Xbox games, because Xbox games don't currently support it.
Maybe that's the vision,
future.
or maybe there'll be new ones. Well, I mean, there's games that come out on the PlayStation that take advantage of accelerometers and the speakers as well. But maybe that's what they're thinking, is that though they weren't available to be developers can take advantage of it on Xbox now that they can with this controller, I guess.
Then we've got the sustainability point again. So it will be rechargeable from the get-go, which normally they come with AA batteries and you have to buy a rechargeable pack. It says it's swappable, so I assume it's the same concept of rechargeable, swappable, rechargeable batteries. But perhaps it comes with it this time. Recycled materials, repair and disassembly, that's all great. They said they've got new modular thumbsticks. Well, I mean, we've had that for a long time in the Elite models. They've had swappable modular thumbsticks, so is that just going to be something that we can do? I don't know why it improved longevity. I've never had a problem with my Xbox controllers, to be honest. No. I like the engage and delight, so lift to wake, so just picking the controller up wakes the controller. That's quite cool. And then everything else is kind of broadly similar. Someone said online that it looks like it's wearing a pair of pants. That was just if you're British.
It does.
I thought it was quite funny.
It's quite a smart looking controller. I like it.
It is, yeah, and it's a subtle difference in the hardware. But if that picture is correct, which we don't know that it is, the share button has moved up 0.5 centimetre, and now sits between what I would still call the start and select menu, but I know that's not what they're called anymore. So I thought that was really interesting. The only other thing that I was going to call out, and it was something that this isn't a secret. This has kind of come out in the FTC stuff. There's always been this talk that Phil Spencer was keen to buy Nintendo. Yeah, and in these documents, there's an email from him to his teams basically saying as much, or implying that he'd had a number of conversations with Nintendo, not about necessarily purchasing them, which I think everyone assumes is what they're trying to do. But in there, he says that Nintendo are very slow to realise that their future of their games is off their hardware. Now, everyone's taken that to mean that Microsoft are trying to buy Nintendo. And everyone who's kind of in the know about big Japanese corporations, it says that that'll never happen. No. There's no way Microsoft will ever be allowed by the Japanese government to buy Nintendo. I think this could be something different, though. So hear me out with and I'm going to say it now, just in case this ever comes to pass. I want to come back to this episode and go, I bloody said it. So an accelerometer baked into the controller, when you've got no games on your console that support accelerometers, means either they're planning to design games that do, or maybe they're preparing for games to come to their console that do. What if that conversation with Nintendo wasn't about buying Nintendo, but instead it was about bringing Nintendo's software to Microsoft hardware? Because they had talked in the past about xCloud coming to Switch. That could be done. What if Microsoft were trying to find a way to bring Nintendo properties exclusively to Xbox, as well as Nintendo hardware, so that Nintendo didn't have to keep making hardware, and their games could play off their hardware? Now, you'd have to have hardware that could sufficiently match what those games could do. The only thing that I can think of that Xbox couldn't do at the moment, that the bulk of Switch games can, is motion control. Now, obviously, you've got the whole Joy-Con thing. There's a whole load of reasons why some of those games wouldn't work. Yeah. But it would make it much easier to port things like Zelda or Mario to Xbox hardware. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying that necessarily would appeal to Nintendo, so this could be nothing to do with it. But if you haven't got the hardware, you can't bring the software. I just wonder whether that's what Microsoft plays, and their conversation about Nintendo being slow to realise the future lies off their hardware is less about being sold and more about taking that software to other hardware.
I think out of the two options of Microsoft buying Nintendo and Microsoft getting a license to have their games on the Xbox platform, I think that's more likely, just to get the games. But I still think that is knowing Nintendo. I mean, don't get me wrong.
I think it's highly unlikely. Highly unlikely.
And do you know, you talk about those emails. I did hear about those emails, and he talked about buying a bunch of different companies. He talked about buying Valve as well as a company, which would be Steam in the PC market.
Someone said that arguably Nintendo is probably a less valuable company. Certainly it would have been a couple of years ago than Activision, potentially. Yeah. And they bought Activision for $69 billion, so don't get me wrong, it's not like small amounts of money. Yeah. But, could Nintendo have been acquired potentially for less if the parties were willing to sell? I think maybe. $69 billion is a lot of money.
It is.
Anyway, so I just thought I'd throw them in for conversation. I thought the controller was very interesting. If the timelines that were sort of leaked up to believed, this would be due next year, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
It definitely feels like, oh yeah, there's the timelines there. So end of next year, it looks like.
Yeah.
At a Xbox Gaming Beat event, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they've
actually,
already got...
it says Sabille launch. It says May on there. May.
Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry, you're right.
It doesn't say what year, though.
Oh, this is in the
Financial
24.
year 24. Okay, so that would be...
May 24.
That'd be May next year then, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Oh, God, it's crazy that they've
if it's to be believed,
all of their events proposals as well for next year. That's...
Actually, no, that can't be right, can it? 24, 25. Financial year 24, 25. Oh, no, it would be. So that would be next year. So if that... I mean, it's fair to say that a lot of the other dates that were leaked in the documents haven't come true.
Yeah.
So, they've been way behind because these documents were leaked and created pre-COVID. And of course, a lot changed in the game dev world. But yeah, so if it's true, Sabille would be May to June. Project Elwood, which is the less exciting revamp of Series S, would be August. And then the brand new Series X all digital would be November.
Yeah. They're clearly banking on the cloud being the future as well. And I know they've obviously xCloud is a very large part of their business as well at the moment. And they're one of the biggest cloud streaming game services as well. So yeah, interesting to see where they'll go. I'm excited about that though.
Yeah.
I do think that I did hear that some of the marketing material that was released, so some of these images and the words around it weren't like officially signed off and approved. Yeah. So some of the wording is going to change, but also things like adorably old digital probably wouldn't have got through. Yeah, and there's other weird things in there as well that, like I saw, for example, they had one slide that talked about fake feedback from one of the customers that was saying how much they feel like Xbox knows them as a consumer and really caters to their needs. And it's like, do people really talk like that?
It's funny, sometimes the project names are better than the actual revision names. Do you remember the code name for the Xbox One X?
I don't.
Which was the mid-cycle upgrade of the Xbox One. It was Project Scorpion, which was way cooler.
Call the console that. That's what they should have done.
Xbox One X, yeah. But they did. I think they did a limited run of those first few consoles for like pre-orders where the Scorpion was, Project Scorpion was kind of it was etched inside the console.
Mm.
So you'd never see it on the outside, but it was etched inside.
Amazing.
In fact, I think, is it the 360? There's one console from Microsoft where there's a Spartan's
really?
face. Yeah, Master Chief's face is inside the console.
Yeah.
Anyway, I can't remember which one it is.
Oh, that's awesome. Didn't know that was a thing. Anyway. So, I suppose the other topic we're going to chat about today, we're going to get onto Starfield. And the reason I wanted to do a topic on Starfield is because there was obviously a lot of hype leading up to its release. There was a lot of weird stories happening leading up to its release as well. So I wanted to touch on those. I've had a chance to have a little play on it, but although I have to say I'm like less than 10 hours in, and I think you're the same as well. Like say...
I'm less than 2 hours in, to be honest. So yeah, I think my commentary on the game itself is going to be very light touch.
Wait, that's fine.
But that's not. We're not here to review it, so I think it's fair to say that if you're about to listen on, you can probably get an in-depth review better somewhere else. Definitely. This is more about bringing together all the points that have gone around it since its
some
release.
Interesting stories that we've seen for sure.
Yeah.
So I guess starting with before it was released. So it was announced at one of the Xbox events. I remember we did an episode on the Xbox event earlier this year as well. I know it was planned for much earlier. I think it was when I was doing research on it. It was supposed to be May 22. It was supposed to be released, and it's been pushed back to this year. I think a lot of games, it's the COVID impact on the development cycle. Yeah. But yes, it was somewhat delayed. Yeah. So announced early this year and already caused a bunch of hype. I read a statistic that said Xbox sales were up 70% a week before its release. That's how much hype there was around it. And obviously it was released on Xbox before PlayStation as well. I think that's right.
I think I had seen as well, I don't know if you've got the stats, but I think the breakdown was more in favour of the S than the X in that 70% increase.
Oh, really? No, I hadn't seen that.
I think more S's were selling than X's.
I suppose it's an easier entry for people, isn't it?
Cheaper entry point, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's a game made by, for those who don't know, it's a game made by Bethesda. So they make games like Skyrim, Elder Scrolls, Oblivion, and Fallout. So very kind of open world RPG. Obviously, there's lots of other games that they do, but they're well versed in the open world RPG space. And so this is Starfield's the space kind of landscape that they're tackling now, instead of, I guess, medieval or post-apocalyptic or any of the other types of games. So this is their first real game in the space side, and I've seen a few comments that are like, a lot of their other games are quite depressing, and this is the first one that's like open world, but and spacey, but quite hopeful and promising, and there's quite a lot of positivity around, I think, in a lot of the game. Ups and downs as well, as there is with always RPGs, but yeah, I think that's one of the things that people have highlighted about this compared to their previous games. So, yes, as I mentioned, open world RPG, and it was available on pre-release from the 1st of September for an extra, I think, $35 on the game. But then the full release was the 6th of December. So 5 days, you're paying an extra $35. Firstly, I want to get your thoughts on that, because that seems quite excessive.
Wasn't it more than, was it $35 on top of the normal game price? It was $100 odd, wasn't it? So when you think about it, actually, it's probably more than $35 people have paid here to access it, because I'd be blown away if a lot of those people hadn't already got Game Pass. Because it came straight to Game Pass. So technically speaking, you spent $100 to get access to it a week early, and I guess to physically own it. But let's be honest, as long as Game Pass exists, it's never
true.
It's owned by Microsoft. So yeah, I think it's kind of crazy, and I'll be honest, it slightly spoilt it for me, because my Twitter feed, or X feed if you have to call it that now, was sort of lighting up for days with loads of excitement about Starfield, and people saying they've created this ship, they've found this thing, they've discovered. I tried to avoid any spoilers, but it took, obviously, that week felt like forever before it finally landed and we were able to play it. By which time I was starting to get a little bit frustrated, not excited.
Yeah.
Because I was like, come on, I just want to get into it now. Like, why have I had to listen to so much of this before I can play? And I was surprised, honestly, at how many people had paid that money.
Yeah.
Given it was coming to Game Pass.
But also,
and a lot of people got caught up in the hype.
A lot of people
got caught in that hype.
Sorry.
No, I was going to say, a lot of people got caught in the hype and bought it who perhaps wouldn't have intended to, but because so many of their friends were playing it and had decided to buy it, had then decided to go out and spend the $100 themselves, which I suspect, I don't know what your research says, has possibly left a few disappointed. But I'll be interested in what your thoughts are.
Well, the other thing with that is I was just quite surprised at how much time people were able to put in those 5 days and just discover so much about it. Because it
always surprises me, though, because I think as someone with a full-time job and a family and very limited spare time, when I hear people are sinking 20, 30, 40 hours into a game in a single week, I think, that's what I sink into work. Handsome. When do you find the time to do that?
Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, like, I haven't got the energy or the time to be able to spend that in a week on anything. So, yeah, but I think that's just life, isn't it? Unfortunately, that's just where we are versus where perhaps the youth of today are, who've got much more spare time like we once had.
Yeah, it's a big game as well. It's a really big game. Like 10 hours, obviously, is not a lot to be in the game, but even then, I feel like I've barely scratched the surface. When we get into our thoughts later on about it, but
I don't think it's overly long.
Hours.
If you want to finish the main campaign, I don't think it's excessive.
True.
I think you can get through the main campaign, and I'm going to say 25 to 30 hours. I don't know that without double checking, but I think I read that, which is still quite long for me. It's still a commitment, but then you are missing so much of what the game has to offer.
All about the side quest.
If you just mainline the quest. And a lot of people were saying, again, in that week, which I'll be honest, slightly contributed to putting me off, was that the game didn't really get going until New Game Plus, which is, for those who don't know, is your second playthrough after finishing the core campaign. And I was like, I've got to complete it before it really gets going. The end game is where people talk about. Oh, really? Okay, interesting. Well, let's go through what you saw then.
I saw a few people who said it was slow to start the main campaign, and then it took quite a few unexpected twists and turns, and then they really enjoyed it after, say, like 3 hours into the main campaign at least. But yeah, I mean, these games, it was the same as Skyrim. I hadn't played Fallout or Oblivion, but I had played Skyrim, and it was the same with that. I don't even think I ever finished the main campaign in Skyrim. I was all about the side quests and just speaking to random strangers and whatever they're going on, whatever they've got going on and what they want me to do to help them. and gaining extra skills and socializing and stuff like that. For me, that was more about the game for me, but and I think it's going to be the same as Starfield. I know when we compared how far we'd gotten in the game, given the amount of time that we both spent, I've done maybe a bit more than you, but I think we're around the same place, and it's because I've just done a bunch of extra side things whilst I was in New Atlantis. Anyway, we'll get onto that in a sec. But the other thing I wanted to chat about, one of the craziest stories before it was launched was this story about, did you hear about the leak? The reviewer copies that was sent out to a bunch of people, and there was this 29-year-old Darren Harris was arrested and charged a week before the pre-release for stealing early copies and posting 45 minutes of gameplay on his YouTube channel, as well as trying to sell the games on some kind of, I think it was a Japanese marketplace he was trying to sell these games on for. And the prices that he was putting them up for, the Constellation Edition, which was the one that gave you the pre-release, was up for $650, and then the normal game is up for $200. How crazy is that? I've never seen leaks like that prominent beforehand. I think it was 2 weeks actually, not a full week, but yeah.
I'm glad they caught him though, because it is a shame when these sort of things get spoiled, and I feel for the developers. I feel for the people who've poured years of their life into this.
Yeah.
Only to have some greedy, whatever you want to call him, something rude, expletive, to try and steal it and milk it for a few £100 profit. I think it's a real shame.
Yeah.
I'm quite grateful that they caught him and throw the book at him. But as far as I'm concerned, it's just unnecessary. It's unfair.
Yeah.
I don't crave that stuff. In fact, as I get older, I'm more interested in avoiding spoilers. I try not to watch anything about a film that I like once I decide I'm invested. Likewise with games, I did this with Starfield. I very much avoided a lot of that stuff on Twitter.
Yeah.
So as not to find out more about the game until I had the chance to experience it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the reality is I probably won't. But yeah. So anyway,
yeah, I think
they got him.
He's getting charged with, I think it's possession of stolen property, which is a fine, to be honest. And the damage that it's done doesn't seem proportionate to the actual punishment, but it's one of these things that I think the damage to the intellectual property and the sharing, it's hard to actually put that into something that you can charge them for, other than handling the stolen stuff. So it's a bit of a shame, but yeah, pretty bad for something that's, in the grand scheme of things, not a lot of money for the amount of damage. Not a lot of money he would make from the amount of damage that he caused. But also fed into the leaks that you saw from before the actual release, even the pre-release, and there was leaks before that. So yeah, crazy story. I've never seen a game that's had that level of leak before its release neither. I'm quite surprised that they sent out review copies that early.
Surely review copies these days are just digital codes as well. So I'm assuming he was shipping out digital codes, not physical copies of the game. It's got to be, isn't it?
I thought
be digital.
I didn't see in the article. I thought it was actual copies, like physical copies.
I would have thought it would be digital codes, because why would you ship out?
How would you sell them on
games? What do you mean? Well, you wouldn't redeem them, would you? They're just codes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
As long as you've not redeemed them and you've stolen them. I don't know. I could be wrong, because I know that they did send out the collector's editions, and they had got their one edition, hadn't they, which came with a smartwatch, which was
I saw that, yeah,
akin to the one that's in the game.
Yeah. Lou later on Unbox Therapy did an unboxing of that, I think, which was quite cool to see. He does a lot of really kind of cool unboxings like that there.
Let's be honest, so for 99% of collectors, that's going to stay in the box and go on a shelf. It'll never be one.
Yeah. Well, that's what collectors do.
It's probably a very average smartwatch. Well, yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, so that was a weird story, and I wonder if we'll ever see that again. I think now that it's happened, I think more people will probably start doing that in the review space. People who have sent these games might start to take advantage, but I don't know, because they're throwing the buck at them, it might put them off. But yeah, weird situation. Also, you'd have thought they put some kind of DRM lock, like some digital rights management lock, on the actual keys themselves to make sure the person who's redeeming the keys is the person you actually sent it to. But anyway.
Do they have time for all that? I don't know. Maybe they don't. I imagine these codes are just bog standard. Well, they might do, but I'd have thought these codes are just bog standard, digital codes.
Yeah, maybe.
That would have just otherwise been given out when the game is released.
Mm. So that was before it launched. And then I want to talk quickly about the general reception after it's launched. There's things I've read online and we can talk about your what you've seen online as well. I think you mentioned you've seen some stories about it. And then I thought we'd go through what our experience has been on the gameplay, anything that we wanted to highlight as part of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I read a few articles on this. Broadly, it actually seems quite positive for a Bethesda game as well, actually. So one of the things I read was Bethesda have always been known to have riddled with bugs on the initial release, and even after the release. I think it's broadly accepted in the game that there's going to be some really weird behavior from some of the NPCs in these worlds, but also things like floating objects, going through walls, all that stuff just kind of comes with Bethesda games. But this one I've seen is praised as one of the most polished and solid releases that Bethesda have ever done on a technical level, especially kind of minimizing the bugs. There's still a few here and there, and I was going to talk about some of them, and I saw it in the game as well. But yeah, I think the reception, at least on the technical side, and the lack of bugginess has been really quite positive. There's one major criticism that I actually have to say I felt as well, and it's the map design is really stupid. I don't know if you've seen it. Have you seen it, like when you're actually on a planet and you open the world map? Not the world map. Yeah, the kind of world that you're on. Do you see that?
I haven't got that. I haven't done that.
Oh, right. Well, I'll show.
That's how bad or how little I've played. So I can see from your notes that that generally you've read a lot of positive stuff about it, and I was a bit surprised at how many amazing sort of high level scores it received, but also how many sort of just kind of good scores. I don't think anyone's smashed it to pieces and said it's awful, but there's a lot of kind of good, not great kind of scores. I think IGN gave it a 7. They got a lot of shit online for that. A lot of trouble.
Really?
Yeah. Loads of people trolling them online about that. But I can, from what I should say that whatever I'm about to repeat now is only what I've heard, not my experience, so it could be utter rubbish. I've heard there's quite a bit wrong with this game in terms of, I've seen people sort of slating the graphics, saying that the graphics aren't all that great.
Oh, I'll get onto that, yeah.
Which I've played, from what I've played, that I didn't look at them and think they were bad. Equally, I wasn't there going, wow, that's incredible. It was very much like, yeah, fine, good. I've heard a lot about the lack of diversity in the planets. So even though there are these kind of infinitely generated planets, you end up doing the same kind of missions in the same mines over and over again, and it's very repetitive.
Yeah.
From what I've heard, and there's just a general lack of things to explore, despite how broad it's supposed to be.
Interesting.
I've also heard that there's a lot of load screens, and I'll be honest, I did experience that.
Really?
And I also thought, and I did experience this, a little bit lazy in terms of storytelling and tutorials. So I think the way that you become empowered or involved in the story is super stupid. So, you open as a bog standard simple miner on a planet, and they are trying to find this artifact. And they find the artifact, and then they just let you, random miner, go and pick it up. Even though they know, as you quickly work out, that the last time someone touched one of these things, they had this amazing vision and was somehow kind of incorporated in this journey. The person who was in charge of this operation let you, as a rando, just go and pick it up.
I don't think they knew that, though. She was just...
I thought they did. I thought when the guy landed... Oh, well, either way, the guy lands and he then talks to you about the fact that he'd had a similar vision.
Yeah.
And then he just gives you his ship. And then you fly to a planet and you're just immediately accepted into this group and set off on a mission to try and solve whatever this thing is. I just felt a bit like, I don't know. I just felt a bit lazy. And then my biggest frustration is that it's one of two things. It's either bad menu design or bad tutorial, or both. So I quite like the gunplay.
Yeah.
I should say the moment-to-moment gameplay is pretty good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
I got into a gunfight, quickly ran out of ammo in a weapon I was using, and instead of it giving me any kind of quick way to cycle to another available weapon, I have to pause the game, go into the menu, go into the gun menu, find a gun I want, equip it, come back out hoping that it has ammo because it doesn't show you on the screen what ammo's in the gun, and then go back into the fighting, and then you quickly run out of bullets again, and it's back to the same process, back into the menus, find the gun, choose a different gun, equip that gun, go back to the fight and carry on fighting. Now, either I've missed a hotspot button, but I tried everything on the controller and could not see a button that just allowed me to select the next gun in my armory, or that's just stupid for a game that is putting you into this firefight.
We've talked about this before. That's exactly what it's like on Skyrim. So if and I know Skyrim's more melee and like magic, so it's a bit different to shooting and needing to kind of switch between weapons when you run out of ammo. But it's very much you open the menu, which pauses the game, switch weapons, or even eat a bunch like wheels of cheese in Skyrim is just a thing. You just eat a ton of wheels of cheese in Skyrim to up your health mid battle, or potions or whatever. Kind of similar in this game. You have like med packs and stims and stuff you can use.
But you can do that menu, from within the combat, though. You can put your you can medicate from within the combat, can't you? I'm pretty sure
I haven't got to that yet.
I'm pretty sure there was a shortcut for that. I taught you that fairly early on.
Oh,
there's no way to cycle between your weapons. So I'm there going, well, and like I guess I'm approaching this as a shooter, kind of not a fan, but shooter as experience. Whether that's a Halo, Gears, Call of Duty, whatever. I've actually never played Skyrim or any of the Oblivion, Elder Scrolls kind of series. I've never played Fallout. So Bethesda games are brand new to me. But it just felt really backwards for a game that has, at that moment at least, I'm in an action game, and I'm having to pause to sort of. And it wasn't even the first menu. There's not a quick way to go straight into my weapons. I have to pause, choose my weapons, then go in and select the weapon that I want. Like I said, hope that it's got something in it. It really frustrated me, and it took me out of the experience within that first couple of hours.
Yeah.
And although I enjoyed the feel of the combat, that constant break in the cycle was really annoying, and I ended up having to run up and just butt people in the head with my gun because I'd ran out of bullets. Didn't feel very good either. Now, again, maybe as the game goes on, I'm going to have so many bullets it's ridiculous, it'll never be a problem, or I'll get some good melee weapons or something. But at that moment, right early in the game, when this game should be trying to hook me in as the new player, I was just getting annoyed. And I did notice the amount of load screens, and that was a little bit frustrating.
Really? What were you playing it on?
Series X.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that it was like slow loading; it's just that they existed.
Yeah.
There seemed a lot of them, and sometimes they were midway through.
Very much like that.
And they seemed midway through exploring kind of like combat zones, and it wasn't like I was going from large outside world to complicated inside level to my another planet. It was like the next part of a room. I just thought it was really odd. So my experience hasn't been great, and I'll be honest, I fully intended to try and play a bit more before today. So hands up if it gets loads better. But I don't have the time to play a game for 10 plus hours or more, which is what a lot of people were saying you needed to do to kind of get over the hump and into the game.
Yeah,
I just haven't got the 10 hours to sink in. I'm expecting to finish a game in 10 hours these days. I've got so little time. Games that go on for more than 10 hours have to be really good to keep me playing.
Yeah.
I can't afford to spend that on a game hoping it's going to catch me.
Yeah.
So I've got to say already, I think Starfield's destined for deletion.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. Well, I can't see me going back. And that's not to say this is bad. I just cannot see me, with I'm poor as I am, going back and playing any more of this.
Interesting. Because I'd say that with Skyrim, the way I was playing it was not I was doing it, months at a time playing this game. It was I would dip in and out. It does feel like one of these games again that you can just dip in and out. You can do an hour like every couple of weeks and just do a couple of missions and then pick it up from there. That's basically what I did with Skyrim, and just kind of learnt a few skills, did a few magic things and so on.
I'll contrast that quickly by saying I have got a friend who has just finished his second playthrough, his first New Game Plus, and he's loving it. He's told me it's top 3 of his best favourite games ever.
Yeah.
And he has found it to be amazing. But he's got way more spare time.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the kids or the intense jobs. He's got more time to sink into it.
Yeah.
And he's really enjoyed it. So it is just my experience and things that I've heard in terms of some of the gameplay choices or design choices. But I just
On
think
the
for me
variety
personally,
though,
I can't play.
on the variety though, I did see an article, and I was going to tell you this because I thought you'd like it. Is there's a couple of different planets that were referenced in this article that were quite like different to at least the home planet that you settle on after the first mission. There's one that was like a gunslinger Wild West situation where there's,
Oh, really?
Yeah, kind of bounty hunters.
I'd love to change my guns multiple times during that.
Yeah, that's true. But also there's a planet called Neon, which is basically a kind of cyberpunk style planet as well. And apparently that one's so big that it's they described it as a mini game in itself. You can kind of just explore that planet and do all the missions on there. So I don't know. It feels like a really big game and lots of different areas for potential that I think it's just going to take such a long time to explore. I can't make my mind up this early. I just can't.
No, and you know, I have to. I am really picky when it comes to games these days. Just because I don't have a lot of time. If it doesn't really get me interested early on, and if I'm not playing it socially, like if I'm playing with you or some friends, I do find myself more willing to let a game grow on me because I'm just enjoying the social aspect of the game. But when I'm sitting on my own and I'm having to carve out small amounts of time to do this, if it doesn't instantly pull me in, I do find it really difficult to motivate myself to go back.
Yeah,
I think what's also interesting, just from I guess a couple of comments I've heard from sort of industry experts, I guess, is they said this game has suffered a little bit from following Baldur's Gate.
Yeah,
because Baldur's Gate as I think it's taken everyone by surprise. And again, I've not played this, but as an RPG, apparently it kind of takes that game genre to another level. So it's not that Starfield is necessarily bad, but when you're caught straight after releasing straight after a game like that that's redefined that genre for you, and you're not as good or not as dynamic or not as interesting, then maybe that's a problem. And then other people are saying, well, then if you compare it as a shooter and forget the RPG elements, then actually Cyberpunk's, is it Liberty something?
Yeah.
Has just come out.
Oh, I've heard that's really good.
Apparently that's amazing, and Cyberpunk, has fully turned around the incredibly awful release that it had 2 or 3 years ago. So you've kind of been sandwiched between two genres that are doing what you're doing better than you, and I think that's possibly a problem.
That's the thing, though.
And then of course there's all the comparisons to No Man's Sky when it comes to exploration.
Of course.
Or lack of.
Well, that's the thing with this game is that all of these different elements are in this game. So one of the things I saw in the articles I was reading was that you can really there's so many different things that you could delve quite deeply into, but some of them you could just completely leave if you're not interested. So planet exploration is obviously that No Man's Sky style thing where you're exploring all these different planets, figuring out the wildlife there, scanning the various different materials and mining stuff whilst you're there as well. That's one whole thing. There's crafting. You can craft kind of armor and weapons and add-ons and lots of different things that you can do with materials that you pick up. There is shipbuilding. That's a whole separate thing that you can dive pretty deeply into, and you can really get into like the dog fighting bandits and stuff in the sky. And you could get through the whole game and just not do much space flying at all. I know one of the articles I read, the writer said that he hated the the flying and didn't like it at all, and actually didn't like the shooting. So he spent a lot of time doing a lot of the persuasive stuff with the NPCs and doing these conversational and storyline driven side quests and stuff like that. So it just feels like that. I know it's not. It's like Jack of all but master of none, right? They're not. It's not the best at planet exploration. If you want that, you would go to the likes of No Man's Sky. It's not the best shooter, futuristic shooter city kind of RPG, because that would be Cyberpunk, and just RPGs in general. Baldur's Gate is got the crown at the moment. Interestingly, side note, did you see in the leaks as well that they passed up putting Baldur's Gate on the Xbox Game Pass? They regret that now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's just a lot in the game. It's so hard to.
And as I said, like I'm pretty sure I've just thrown lots of negativity into the mix there, but I think generally there's been a lot of positivity around the game. But there is this kind of a small group that are a little less pleased with it and a little less enthusiastic, and unfortunately those tend to be the people I've been like following on socials.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing a real mixed bag. I've seen the really good stuff, but I've also seen some of the negative stuff. And unfortunately, and maybe the people who say you shouldn't be guided by this, which is absolutely justified comment, but because of the amount of time I have to invest in my games, I've heard a lot of that, and I found it quite off-putting.
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't make me. They're not the sort of things that I think I'd be able to look past and then crack into, because again, that's intended to be that long already has got to be incredible for me to have half a chance of getting through it.
Yeah.
Or even getting deep enough into it to say given it a good go. The fact that there's so many of these people saying, well, it takes quite a long time to get into, there's still some problems even then, there's not a lot to explore, blah, blah, blah. I just think maybe this isn't the one for me.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. I wonder as well whether if they're going to invest in this, will this be one of those games that maybe in 6 or 12 months' time, with a couple of patches, will suddenly be going, okay, this is the definitive version. Skyrim got patched multiple times, didn't it? I think over its life cycle.
Yeah.
There's already people in the modding community. Well, yeah. Well, yeah, it's on everything, isn't it? That's the joke. It's a bit like Doom, isn't it? They install that on everything.
Or GTA 5.
Or GTA 5. But I was going to say now, the
modding community,
with the patching, the modding community's already done incredible things. And I saw someone on Twitter say, well, this one guy has modded something in 2 weeks that is better or works better than a 5-year development cycle or whatever it was or more.
Yeah.
Why did the Bethesda team not do this?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, maybe they'll adopt it. Maybe they'll take it on as suggestions. One of the things on that, and I was just talking about a second ago, is the map. So when you're on a planet, the map is basically, well, it doesn't really look like a map. It's like a sea of these little dots, and then you have like waypoints of where on this planet.
It's trying to show
see.
Almost like topography, isn't it, of the
kind of, but not very well at all. You can't see any detail of the planet you're on. And considering, I think it even has a comparison in here in the article that I was sharing. 12 years ago, the map for Skyrim, when you actually go into a city, is so detailed. You can see like all the different
problem. Is this not the problem though with procedurally generated planets? Because there's supposed to be an infinite number of planets in this game because every planet is procedurally generated. So
yeah, but this is the home planet. This one is not procedurally generated.
Yeah, but even so, the issue, but then you can't go from one planet to another and have radically different quality of maps. One of the things that I think has been said is that it almost lacks that ability to go and talk to a friend and share the amazing experience you had, because you can share it, but there's no way that person can ever recreate it, because theoretically your environment, your planet, your mine, your bad guys are supposed to be all random. And apparently even the New Game Plus does that. I don't know if you're aware that it's possible, and the reason why people are playing it so many times is that your story can change as you play a new round. So your story, so your new game, there's no way to know this for sure. So when you re-roll and you start your New Game Plus, you may get different elements, you may get some of the same elements, that everyone gets something slightly different. So even then, talking to your friends, they're going to have a different experience because potentially their experience is not the one you're having.
Yeah.
Which is, on one hand, that's cool. And a part of me would have gone, that's really clever.
Yeah.
But also I can understand why that might make it difficult then to kind of get into to share the conversation, the fun with others, because you can't tell them about something and they can go and discover it. They perhaps never could find it.
Yeah, I suppose, like me telling you about that Neon planet and the Wild West planet, you might never find those planets.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I suppose, seeing as we're on the criticism trend, there's one thing that I wanted to chat about, and that's they received some criticism around their performance on PC, and it's because, specifically using NVIDIA and Intel hardware on PCs, it seems that the game is much more optimized for AMD GPUs and CPUs. And digging into some of the research around it, the reason is because Microsoft have a strategic kind of partnership with AMD around the development of, at least around the development of Starfield. And that's because, and I didn't know this, I found out in the article, is that in the Xbox, the GPUs are actually based on AMD Ryzen, not Ryzen, sorry. What's the RDNA, I think, is the architecture. Radeon, that's it. Radeon architecture, which is the AMD GPUs. So they worked quite closely with Microsoft to optimize the game for the Xbox, obviously. And so that worked and translated quite well to the same architecture for the AMD GPUs and CPUs that are on PC as well. So it's and some of the differences were like 46% in performance between top spec AMD versus top spec NVIDIA GPUs, which is crazy when you think of the difference.
I did see I did see that you've captured the full quote here, but Todd Howard, the director, when challenged on this base, he said, "Our game's perfectly, he's optimized perfectly well. You just need a better PC." Was basically what it said.
Brutal. He's got no chill about it. I think he was asked. That. I'll read that. Yeah. I'll read the full quote. It said, Starfield director Tom Howard was asked why Bethesda hadn't optimized the game for PCs during the Bloomberg's interview last week. And his response is, "We did. It's running great," responded Howard. "It's a next-gen PC game. Really do push the technologies, so you may need to upgrade your PC for this game," which is like... I mean, we're talking about last-gen NVIDIA, so which is what I've got. The RTX 3080 Ti is what I've got. And I have to say that, I mean, I'm not suffering any performance issues, but it's like, how good could it have been with if it was optimized? And it's funny,
isn't it? He's saying that, but it's running on a 3-year-old games console.
Well, exactly, yeah. But it's AMD, so it's...
No, I know, but that's my point, isn't it? To say that it's next gen and you need a better PC and stuff. Well, if you've upgraded or bought your PC in the last 3 years, then theoretically it's essentially as good as, on par with the Xbox. Depends what you bought, doesn't it? It's a minefield, but yeah,
I mean, the point is, I suppose, that it's kind of scary that this could start happening for any games that are developed through Microsoft, because they're obviously going to have a favoritism towards optimizing it for Xbox as opposed to any of the PCs out there. So, and it's pretty clear from this release that AMD had better access to the game development process to optimize it for their hardware than NVIDIA and Intel did. So I think that might be a trend going forward, is that Xbox games and Microsoft produced games are going to be performing better on AMD hardware, which is just such a shame. I hope that the criticism around this is pushed them enough to change.
We'll all be playing it in the cloud anyway in the next 5 years.
So true. Hardware is going to be...
And it's interesting that it's a fair argument, by the way, completely fair.
Yeah.
But Microsoft are one of the few studios that develop a game for their console and Windows at the same time.
Yeah.
Sony never released their exclusives on PC day and date. True. You're lucky then if you get a port 5 years later in some instances. But still, it doesn't make it better. Still a pain. It's still difficult for them. Interestingly, if you're into Bethesda games, apparently it's been confirmed Elder Scrolls, the next one, will also
that in the leaks. Yeah.
Also be skipping PlayStation. So
you're
going to have to suck it up and deal with Xbox.
I didn't see that. That's brutal. Wow. But just to cover off that NVIDIA story, there's apparently an update that was pushed out recently that's supposed to increase the performance of RTX 30 series and 40 series, but only increasing it by 5%, I think the article said. So if you were suffering from the 46% difference, you're still not quite there.
Wait until next year and buy an all-digital Xbox Series X.
Yeah, maybe I will.
The future. No, don't. Yeah, I mean that's a real shame for the PC community, and that's not me being sarcastic. I think that is a bit shitty, because it's expensive business as well, because people build very expensive rigs around one set of tech. It's not easy to rip the core out of that and swap it for something different.
Yeah. I mean, you expect a difference.
Expense.
You expect a difference between the PC and consoles, but not between comparative GPUs within your PC. It feels a bit like you cheated. But there you go. So, shall we talk about some of the positives? One of the things I saw, actually, and it's quite a fun story that I wanted to bring up, is obviously you can customize the ships in very cool designs. And I saw quite a cool article summarizing some of the coolest designs that people have done. So I thought I'd bring that up and maybe we'd go through that. So
if this is in your list, then just tell me to shut up, but have you seen the hamburger?
I haven't. I'm going to have to Google that one as well. If you find the link on the side.
With a combination of a very wide ship with stacked with beige ships top and bottom, and then red, green and brown ships in the middle to represent the layers of the burger and the lettuce and the tomato.
That's hilarious. That's such a good idea.
I saw it on Twitter today.
So some of these ships, I have to admit, I don't really know. So this one, for example, the capybara ship. Oh, I suppose it's supposed to just look like a capybara, which is the cute little kind of fluffy I guess they look like giant guinea pigs almost, which is cute. Look at this for a spaceship. Anyone who's watching on YouTube can see it. And I'll include the link in the notes so you can check out these ships as well. But I guess the point is that it's so customizable that you can basically make the ships look however you want.
I'm sure I'd seen some sort of design whereby someone was saying that if you made it look a certain shape, and it was either something like an L shape or something weird, that you couldn't be hit, made it unshootable by enemy ships. Yeah, I'm sure I read something about that. If you structured it in a certain way, it basically made it incredibly difficult for rival ships to hit you. Because of the way that the AI, it's not because of it's clever, it's because it's tricking the game. The AI aims for a certain point on the ship, and that point is vacant if you build your ship in a certain shape. I can't remember what the trick was, but I thought it was quite interesting.
Fair enough. Here's the second one for the Star Wars fans, the Millennium Falcon. And this actually looks really quite convincing. It actually looks like it could have been straight out of the film almost. Mm-hmm. It's amazing how detailed they've managed to get with this design. And I haven't played with the designs itself, but from what I understand, it does take time to be able to get it to look anything like.
I think you've got to also, haven't you got to also be able to buy certain components, and you need a certain amount of credits to it. Yeah, it's not quick and easy to do.
No.
Cool though.
It is cool. So Millennium Falcon. We've got this one that wasn't sure about as well. It's called Squid Class
I think
Battleship.
It's meant to look like a squid, isn't it, basically?
Oh, is that what it is? I thought it was from something.
Oh no, it does say Mobile Suit Victory Gundam from '93, so actually no.
It's a Gundam.
I guess it's also a reason why it looks that shape, isn't there? It looks
kind of Gundam.
It's got that, a squid kind of shoots off the movement led by the head, and then the arms will follow. It looks a little bit like that, doesn't it?
Looks very cool though.
Shape.
I think that when we delve into the silly ones, so we've got Thomas the Tank Engine.
You're always going to get Thomas the Tank, won't we?
I don't know why this is a thing, but yeah, Thomas the Tank Engine as a starship, which is it looks hilarious, I have to say. Doesn't even look like.
I'll tell you what, though, if that suddenly appeared on the horizon, you'd shit yourself, wouldn't you?
You would. You really would. If they ever open up for online gameplay, that would be hilarious. You just start battling, and then all of a sudden you see a Thomas the Tank Engine appear. Hilarious. We have the D-77 TC
Halo,
Pelican.
Isn't it?
It is Halo.
I'll be seeing one of those shortly.
We will be, yeah. But how cool is that? That actually looks like it's...
Yeah, looks very convincing.
It looks very convincing. That actually looks very similar to the one in the game, which I'm impressed with. There's the Borg Cube. You ever a Star Trek fan?
No. But I'm aware of the Borg Cube. I think the only film I ever really enjoyed was the one where they turned Picard into a Borg.
What was that one?
Can't remember. But I watched that one and enjoyed it. But otherwise, I'm not really a Trekkie. Yeah, I don't dislike it. I've sat and watched it, but I don't follow it.
But I mean, impressive that they managed to make just a cube, a giant cube, into a spaceship. And there's a shot in the article of it taking off, and it looks hilarious. So there you go. We have the Consular class cruiser, which is a lesser known Star Wars ship, I believe. Not something I'm super familiar with.
It does look familiar now you've said it, yeah. Yeah. That's made number 4, though.
I know.
Serenity, okay, yeah.
The
nice.
Serenity, the ship from Joss Whedon's Firefly, which is quite convincing as well. That looks really quite right.
Looks like that. If you'd said that was in-game design ship, I'd have believed you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It looks like a legitimate ship.
That's
but I suppose
cool
it's based on a legitimate ship, isn't it? Whereas Thomas the Tank is not based on a spaceship. So.
Also quite convincing, though. I mean, if that was on some train tracks, maybe it would look twice. But yeah, no, I really like this. I like the idea that instead of waiting for the game to release official ships as part of it, which they might do eventually if they get their designs on it. Sometimes they
release they really need to, do they? They could just release more components and parts that you could mod into your ship, and people would be very happy with it.
Yeah, that's what I like about this. You can just design your own.
And it's good because they're functional, aren't they? I believe you can walk around the ships once they're built. It's not like just kind of an outside look. Yeah, you can go and walk around it, and you choose the different living components and stuff that go in there, which is really clever.
Right. Yeah. There is the Imperial Star Destroyer, another Star Wars.
That's less convincing.
It is less convincing.
Those weird little things that have dropped on the top of it, I don't quite understand.
The only thing I can think of is that it was hard to actually do.
Unless they're necessary, and then they're necessary to make it functional. Yeah, I was going to say it doesn't really flow with the design of the actual ship they're copying, but maybe they need to have those components on to make it actually work for the game. I don't know.
Yeah. Bit of a stretch at number 2.
What's number 1 then?
I like this one a lot. So this one's the Planet
Yeah.
Express ship from
Again, not quite as
Futurama.
convincing because obviously in the cartoon it's very sort of very
almost
round.
like a blimp.
Yeah, it's that shape doesn't really play as nicely with the components I guess you get to build with in. It's a very classic sort of the rocket ship that you're used to seeing, isn't it? As you described the blimp, whereas that doesn't quite work, but it is recognisable instantly. I knew what it was without having to read the descriptions.
What I quite like about it is that obviously Futurama's a cartoon, so you expect a bit more realism with the ship, so you can kind of forgive the difference. It's supposed to look like a cartoon in the cartoon, but this is like almost as if the cartoon could have been modelled off this ship.
Yeah.
Kind of thing in real life. But there you go. I thought that was like a fun thing to chat through. Some people having fun designing ships on the game.
I think it's an appropriate way to end it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I guess to summarize, I'm going to keep playing. I really enjoyed it. There's obviously some bugs here and there, but it's just such a big game, and I really enjoy the side quests and meeting people and picking up random things to do, maxing out the skill trees, collecting random items. I'm all about that game, just kind of exploring, and not. I don't really care so much about the main quest, as I say in Skyrim. I never really finished it, but I'll do it because I actually heard conflicting things. I heard good things from some of the articles I read, but I know obviously some people didn't like it. But I'm going to do it because I think it'll be good. But yeah, so I guess my summary is I'm just going to keep playing because I was enjoying it. And it sounds like you're on the other side.
I will probably end up deleting it. I don't know. I'd like to, but if I'm honest, I'm looking at what's coming out in the next few weeks. I've got Spider-Man 2 on the way for the PS5. That will get played cover to cover, because I am going to invest the time in that, which will probably mean by the time Starfield's out, there'll either be other competing games of interest, or I'll have just lost interest. I'm fortunately not far enough through that I would probably need to try and pick up the game months later and remember what I'd done. Yeah. I would likely just restart because I am only an hour or so in. Yeah. So maybe I'll give it a go. Maybe I'll wait until it gets a bit of patching done, see if anything is done to the gameplay or exploration. But I've got to be honest and say probably not for me.
Fair enough. I'll not see you on stream with it then soon. Cool. Right. Well, we'll leave that there then. That's all for this episode. Thank you for hanging out with us. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. It really does help the channel. And also check us out on all good podcasting services, so you don't miss an episode as well. And we'll see you next time.